Councillor Denise Joy, the Chair of the Licensing Committee, and pleased to welcome you to this remote meeting of the committee. The meeting will be broadcast live and recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel, and this will include the instant messaging. Will anyone else be recording these proceedings?
No.
I'm here. If I don't hear anything, then I will take that as a no from everybody. Okay. I'll ask that people at the meeting will know if this will be happening. I will now explain how we intend to proceed this evening. My role as the chairman will continue. However, the responsibility for managing the meeting has been temporarily assigned to the Democratic and Electoral Services Manager, Mr. O'Connell. This officer will not steer the debate. They will merely assist in implementing the remote meeting protocols. An additional Democratic Services Officer, Ms. Parfitt, is also with us to produce the minutes and to provide procedural advice as required. Members are reminded that instant messaging will be visible to all those viewing the meeting and must only be used by members to indicate their wish to speak. I will now ask the facilitator to take the attendance register by reading out the list of the committee members who will confirm their attendance by answering present. Ryan.
Thank you. Councillor Fissenden.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Fort.
Yes, present.
Councillor Garton. Sorry, Councillor Garton.
Hello, can you hear me?
Very faintly.
Can you hear me now?
That's better. Thank you, Councillor Garton. Councillor Mrs. Grigg.
Present.
Councillor Hinder.
Present.
Councillor Joy.
Present.
We've had apologies from Councillor McLaughlin. Is Councillor Pearl here, who I understand is substituting?
I am indeed present.
Thank you. Councillor Nagy.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Mrs. Robertson.
Present.
Councillor Rose.
Present.
Councillor Sams. Yeah, I can see that Councillor Sams isn't on the call. Councillor Springett.
Present.
Thank you, Chairman. That's all.
Thank you. I will now ask the facilitator to read out the list of officers present and which items they are presenting.
Thank you. So we have John Littlemore, who's the Head of Housing and Community Services, Sharon Bamborough, who is the Head of Licensing, who will be presenting on item 17, Lorraine Neal, Senior Licensing Officer, who will be presenting on items 14, 15 and 16. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And so now we go to the agenda, which is item 1, apologies. Apologies have been received from Councillor McLaughlin. Is that right, Ryan?
That's correct. And although Councillor Sams isn't here, she had indicated a wish to be at this meeting. So I think it's just worth noting for the committee.
Okay, thank you. Item 2, substitute members, which we have, which is Councillor Pearl. Item 3, urgent items.
Sorry, Chairman, can we just get Councillor Pearl to confirm who he's substituting for?
Absolutely. Councillor Pearl, could you tell us who you're substituting for?
Thank you, Chair. I suggest Jonathan Pearl for Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you.
Thank you. There are no urgent items this evening. And item 4, there are no visiting members. Item 5, are there any disclosures by members and officers? I'll take that as none. Item 6, disclosures of lobbying. The facilitator will ask members of the committee and substitutes in alphabetical order if they have any disclosures of lobbying. They must either answer none or yes and specify the agenda item or items. Mr. O'Connell.
Thank you, Joan. Councillor Fissenden. Councillor Fissenden,
Hello.
have you been lobbied on any items?
No.
Councillor Fort,
None.
Councillor Garton?
No, I haven't. Can you hear me better now?
Certainly can, yes, thank you. Councillor Mrs Grigg,
No.
Councillor Hinder,
None.
Councillor Joy,
None.
Councillor Nagy,
None.
Councillor Pearl,
None.
thank you. Councillor Mrs Robertson,
No.
Councillor Rose,
No.
and Councillor Springett.
No.
That concludes the lobbying. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I think it was clear that Councillor Pearl was subbing for Councillor McLaughlin. Am I correct?
Yes, we've got a note of that.
That's fine. Thank you. Item 7. To consider whether any item should be taken in private because of the possible disclosure of exempt information. I intend to take the minutes part 2 of the Licensing Act 2003 Subcommittee meeting held on the 6th of December 2019 with the part 1 minutes under item 9 without going into part 2. Is everybody agreeable to this?
Agree.
Agreed. Yeah.
Agreed.
I didn't hear
Agreed.
any no's.
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 8. Minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of November 2019, and you can find them on page 1. And I'm just going to ask if they can be agreed as a correct record. If anyone is saying no, then can they indicate, please? And we have no one indicating no. So the minutes will be signed as a correct record at a later date. Item 9, minutes part 1 of the Licensing Act 2003 Subcommittee held on the 6th of December 2019, which you can find on page 5 and 6. We'll do it the same way. I move that the minutes part 1 and 2 of the Licensing Act 2003 Subcommittee meeting held on the 6th of December 2019 be agreed as a correct record.
Agreed.
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 One say no.
Chairman,
Sorry.
Councillor Sams has joined the meeting.
Hello. Good evening, Councillor Sams. Good to have you with us. Do you want to check whether she's had any? Yeah, I'll leave it to you.
Absolutely. Councillor Sams?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Good.
Do you have any interest to disclose or any disclosures of lobbying?
No, I don't. Thank you. Sorry, I'm late.
Thank you.
That's fine, Janetta. It's good you've joined us. We're on item 9. And we're just moving the minutes, which nobody had any problem with. So again, I will say that the minutes will be signed as a correct record at a later date. Item 10, minutes of the Licensing Act 2003 Subcommittee held on the 13th of January 2020. These can be found on page 7 to 13. Again, I move that the minutes of the Licensing Act 2003 Subcommittee meeting held on the 13th of January 2020 be agreed as a correct record.
Agreed.
Everybody okay?
Agreed.
Agreed. Yep.
Brilliant.
Agreed.
The minutes will be signed as a correct record at a later date. Thank you. Item 11. Petitions. I understand there are no petitions. Mr. O'Connell?
That is correct. No petitions.
Thank you. Item 12. Question and answer session from members of the public. Mr. O'Connell?
There are none. No questions.
Thank you. And questions from members of to the chairman. Again.
No questions there either.
Thank you. Now we move to item 14. Petitions. Oh no, I'm not. I'm on item 14. The committee reports. Sorry, that's because I turned over. I'll read out the agenda item and then refer to the officer who will be presenting the report, except where any members of the public or representatives of any organisations have registered their wish to speak. After the report has been introduced, I will then advise members of the list I have received by the instant messenger of those members wishing to speak, and then ask if there are any other members who wish to speak. These might be members who have dialed in, and I know that Councillor Fort has. Members may be reminded that the use of the green telephone is sufficient in demonstrating their wish to speak. You all know where the green telephone is, or does anyone need guidance?
Yes, please.
Ryan?
Okay, so in the instant messaging, you'll see along the bottom, there are several symbols, one of which is a smiley face, it's an emoji. So if you can click on that, it will bring up a number of different emojis for you to choose from, one of which is a green phone with a question mark above it.
Where am I going on the iPad? I don't.
I think the instant messaging is in a slightly different location on the iPad, so there should be a speech bubble. I think it might actually be at the top of the screen.
All gone very quiet. All gone very quiet.
I've got a speech bubble at the bottom of my screen.
Yes, you will have, because you're on a different device.
Right, that's where the confusion is, because everyone seems to have a different device with different emojis.
Yeah, councillors, can I just jump in there? Just to let you know.
And I see we've had someone else join us, Mr. O'Connell. Was it Councillor Mackay I just saw come up?
Councillor Mackay has been on the call for a while. He's not a visiting member. He's a member observing.
Okay. Hi, Malcolm. Right. I'm going to carry on now. I will invite the officer to respond as required during the debate. After the list of members wishing to speak has been exhausted, I will ask if any members wish to come back with more questions or comments. If a member wishes to propose a new motion or amend the current one, I will ask for a seconder, with members going through instant messaging or indicating verbally. And the first one to signal will be the seconder. The seconder will be asked if they wish to speak or reserve their right. At the end of the debate, any amendments having been voted on, I will sum up and the original or substantive motion will be put to the vote. I will also ask if all the recommendations can be taken together or whether the committee wishes to take them separately. I will ask the facilitator to go through the list of members in alphabetical order and ask them for their vote, which would be for, against or abstain. I will have a second or casting vote regardless of whether I have used my first vote. The Democratic Service Officer will be asked to confirm the result of the vote and I will announce the decision. If a report is for information only and the recommendation has been moved and seconded, I will ask if that was agreed, and if there is no dissent, a named vote will not be taken. At the end of each item, I will ask for a brief pause while those who wish to do so can leave the meeting. So I don't think there's anything really that is very different to how we do it if we were sitting in the town hall. So we will now move on to item 14 on page 14 to 27, the Hackney Carriage Fare Increase 2020. And this report will be introduced by Lorraine Neal.
Good evening, everybody.
Evening.
Okay, the report at agenda item number 14 is ask members to consider the request made by the Maidstone Taxi Proprietors Association for an increase to the fares, and the report sets out their reasons. As the local authority, we do have the power to set the maximum fares for hackney carriage vehicles under section 65(1) of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1976. We don't, however, have the power to set the fees for private hire vehicles. Sorry, fares, not fees. The current fare tariff for hackney carriage vehicles has been in operation since the 7th of December 2013, so it's been 6.5 years since there's been an increase in the fares. The request for the increase was received on the 18th of January 20 and was originally scheduled to go before committing on the 19th of March. Unfortunately, that meeting was cancelled due to the pandemic, and so it's being considered tonight. The request for the increase from the association asks it to be achieved in two ways. One is a decrease in the meterage of the meter, which currently is 598.5 metres, and the request is to reduce it down to 550 metres. And also an increase in the charge for that first 550 metres will be increased to £3. So in comparison with the current tariff 1, those changes achieve an increase of 47p for the first part of any journey on tariff 1. They've also requested that the additional distance of 140.4 metres be reduced to 125 metres, and that the waiting time, which is currently 3 minutes 5 seconds, be reduced to 2 minutes 30 seconds, and the additional waiting time of 37.2 seconds be reduced down to 30 seconds. The effects of the request are shown in the comparison table at 2.3, and overall it shows an average increase for customers who travel 2 miles on all three tariffs to be 11.24%. The usual practice has always been that the fare tariff is reviewed at the request of the hackney carriage trade. Usually it's to bring it in line with the rate of inflation. On checking the Office for National Statistics, it shows, and that shows in the table at 2.5, that over the 7 years from 2013 to 2020, inflation has increased by 17.49%, which is a high increase than that's been requested by the trade. At 2.6 of the report, you can see a comparison table which shows a 2 mile journey for hackney vehicles licensed by all Kent authorities. And obviously, if the increase is agreed, then Maidstone will be the dearest authority, but not disproportionately so. And so it's felt that the request to amend fares can be recommended by officers. However, licensing do not support the request at 2.8 about the request to display a destination table as well, for the reason actually stated there. Licensing don't actually receive many complaints about overcharging, but we think that this destination table is displayed. People get confused and think that that is actually a concrete price, and actually that can be affected by other factors such as waiting time. So we don't actually recommend that request. So the report makes the recommendations that the table of fares set out in Appendix 3 to this report be agreed, that the Head of Housing and Community Services be authorised to give public notice of the Council's intention to fix this table of fares for hackney carriage vehicles in accordance with Section 65(2) of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 76 take effect. And apologies here, this is my error, that date is actually wrong. That should have been amended, and it should probably read July 2020, early August 2020. So my apologies there, that's a typo that I didn't correct. 3 is, should objections be received in relation to the public notice, then the matter is brought back to Licensing Committee for consideration within 2 months of the publication. So the available options are to agree the increase in the initial hiring charge for tariffs 1, 2, 3 by reducing the initial distance from 598.5 to 550 and the additional 140.4 to 125. To reduce the waiting from the first 3 minutes 5 seconds to 2 minutes 30 seconds and every additional 37.2 seconds to 30 seconds, or do nothing. And 4 sets out the preferred options and reasons for recommendation. And that's it.
Thank you, Mrs. Neal. I have 2 councillors indicating to speak so far. First will be Councillor Garton and then Councillor Pearl. So, Councillor Garton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The trade asset request and
Can't hear you very well, Councillor Garton.
so am I fading again? Can you?
You're sounding a bit like a Dalek.
Yeah. Only try to. Let me. Can you take? Connect and reconnect.
Councillor Joy, would you like to move to the next person on the list?
Yeah. Councillor Pearl.
Thank you, Chair. Pedantic point first. I appreciate that the figures at para 2.5, the table there, it doesn't sort of total 17.49. It totals about 18.8% because the inflation compounds, and all you've done there is added up the percentages. Obviously, it underlines the the sort of the fairness of the increase, but I thought I'd make that point anyway. The related point is I know how badly taxi drivers have been hit recently with the with the lockdown, and as well as obviously not getting the passing trade from their from the taxi ranks and so forth. They've had all their KCC contracts pulled and things like that. So it's interesting that the timing has fallen in the way it has, but I think it's going to be sort of rather welcome to them that they're able to sort of do this now. So my only other point I was going to make was on the point about the the indicative fares and so forth. I know that when I get in a black cab, I do sort of turn around and sort of say how much to wherever, please. And I know full well, that is a guesstimate and things will happen. I think some people aren't necessarily as bold as to ask sometimes, and I think that information would be helpful. And I sort of see the argument that some people might mistake that for an absolute price, but most people know the concept that there's a meter running, and they sit there at the back and they'll see that meter running as they're going along, or indeed see the meter running as they're stuck there in the traffic jam. So I'm not convinced that I'm not convinced that there's any good reason to deny the trade's request here in that regard.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. Looking over at my to the left, we do have somebody that has proposed to accept the report, which was Councillor Nagy, and Councillor Sams has seconded. However, I still have people that would like to speak, so we'll carry on. Is that okay, Ryan?
Well, it's okay as long as the proposer and the seconder don't wish to speak at this point.
So let's go to Councillor.
I would like to have a speak quick. I completely agree with what Councillor Pearl said. I thought I'd come in now because I do agree with Louise though. If you're sitting there looking at the meter And while you're on a trip that's about 20 minutes or so, and you look over and read that, you'll be thinking, oh, is there something wrong with that meter? And I can completely understand how Louise was reading that. And I think there's a possibility that could make an argument which would be unnecessary in my view. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sams, did you come in?
No, that's okay. I'm quite happy to have the other people speak first.
Thank you. Next I have Councillor Rose. No, I don't. It's Councillor Springett first. Sorry, Val. Councillor
That's
Springett.
okay. That's no problem. It was just a very quick comment that I see both sides of the argument for the likely fares destination chart. Perhaps if it was done with a very big print across the top, this is a guide only, and time of day and traffic conditions will cause variations, might be a way around it. That's all.
Thank you. And Councillor Fissenden. Is Councillor Fissenden still with us?
I can't see her picture at all.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can?
Yeah.
Yes, just wanted to make a comment about 2.6. We've got our proposed of 11.18%. Do we know, just out of interest, how much the other councils are going to put up their fares?
No, not currently.
Okay, thank you.
And Councillor Hinder, did you wish to speak?
Yes, it concerns the same point.
Yes.
What's unfortunate is that we do not know if and when the other authorities have set their current rates. So, to me, the table is skewed because it appears that Maidstone is the highest, but it may well be that the others haven't set their rates for a number of years. So it would have been helpful if we had that information.
Right. Mrs. Neal, did you want to come back?
I'm not aware of anybody else, reviewing their fares in recent times. These figures have been taken from the private hire monthly from February 2020. So other authorities may have already put their fares up since then, but I'm not aware of any. I think maybe Tunbridge Wells have, but other than that, I'm not aware of any other authorities that have done a recent fare review.
Hello, this is Sharon. Can I just come in on this one?
Yes, do.
It was only just a particular query that you're discussing. I'm glad Lorraine said about Tunbridge Wells, because I was about to say I can't speak for Tunbridge Wells because I'm not sure, but I can tell you that Sevenoaks took a similar request to their licensing committee back in January this year to increase the fare tariffs for the Hackney carriage, and it was turned down on the basis that there wasn't actually enough support from the industry all wanting it. It was just 2 or 3 who were pushing for it, but when the consultation went out, there wasn't a general support for it from the trade, and therefore they didn't agree an increase to the fare tariffs. So I just thought, as you were asking, you would like to know that, and that's it.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much. Did you need to come back, Councillor Hinder?
No, that reinforces what I was saying. That there's a lack of certain information now.
Right.
That one could base a true judgment on.
Yeah, okay. I'd like to ask if Councillor Fort has any questions.
Not this. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, not at this time.
No, okay. Well, I don't have any other councillors.
Yes, Madam Chairman.
So can we try going back to Councillor Garton?
Councillor Garton, can we hear you?
Can you hear me better this time now?
Now we can hear you, yes.
Excellent. Yes, sorry for the technical problems earlier. This is a proposal being set by the trade association. They should know best what fares they can afford to charge, what the customers will be willing to accept. So I am more than happy to agree their recommendations, including the proposed fare table of possible expected fares. I think that is a particularly good idea. But as Councillor Springer says, it needs to come with a big health warning on top. A, it is a daytime fare. That needs to be pointed out quite clearly. And also it is an approximate minimum fare. I think that should be displayed quite clearly in bold above, but it is a very useful handy guide, and I think we should certainly encourage, if not even prescribe this to the association.
Okay. Mrs. Neal, did you want to come back on that?
No, I think that's fair. As long as it's very clear that it is a real, like Noddy's guide, that's fine.
Thank you. Thank you. Right, I have no one else that's wishing to speak. We have a proposer, Councillor Nagy, seconded by Councillor Sams. So I will now ask the facilitator to go.
Councillor Joy.
Jumping in, yeah.
The proposal put forward by Councillor Nagy and seconded by Councillor Sams was the proposal as per the papers.
Yes.
Which doesn't include.
Yeah, that's just what I was going to say. Obviously, we are agreeing to have that alteration from what Louise mentioned. I wasn't for it, but if Louise thinks it's workable, then that's good enough for me. So I'll keep the as it was proposed.
Okay. Does the seconder accept that as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So we can move on, yeah?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. I will now ask the facilitator to go through the list of members in alphabetical order and ask them for their vote, which would be for, against, or abstain. Over to you, Ryan.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Fissenden. Councillor Fissenden?
Can you hear me?
Oh, yep, can hear you now.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Fort.
4.
Councillor Garton.
4.
Councillor Mrs. Grigg.
4.
Councillor Hinder.
4.
Councillor Joy.
4.
Councillor Nagy.
4.
Councillor Pearl.
4.
Councillor Mrs. Robertson.
4.
Councillor Rose.
4.
Councillor Sams.
4.
And Councillor Springett.
4.
That concludes the voting. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I will now ask the Democratic Services Officer to confirm the result of the vote.
Yes, that is 12-4.
12-4. Thank you. Right, moving on. Item 15, which can be found on page 28, the fourth quarter budget and performance monitoring report. And this report will be introduced by Mrs. Neal. Mrs. Neal.
Okay. Agenda item 15. This report is asking members to consider the draft street trading policy, which is attached as Appendix 2 to the report. The current policy was first issued in March 2010, reviewed in 2014, and is attached as Appendix 1, and has been amended and brought up to date to reflect the current practices and regulations which provide more clarity. The aim is that the document provides applicants with all the information they require in order to assist them with their street trading applications. There have been some alterations to the policy, one being exemptions for certain areas of land which are owned and controlled by public authorities and charities, with the suggestion that they be excluded from the scope of requiring street trading. I understand there may be legal implications to that suggestion, and the adoption of it may not be a possibility. I'm sure legal will come in on that one. Also, what used to be referred to as a market consent is now termed a multi-user consent, and this assists us in making one person responsible for events where multiple stalls or traders are present. It reduces the burden and negates the need to issue consents to every person in attendance at a specific event. The requirement also to check an applicant has been included so that we check criminal records and right to work. And also a request to be able to charge an admin fee, which will be a non-refundable fee, will cover the costs of staff undertaking the consultation, which is a requirement for all applications. Currently, if an applicant is unsuccessful, we have to basically refund their entire fee. And actually, there's a specific, amount of work involved with a street trading application. So the fees that are being recommended are obviously at page 31. It shows you the current fee scheme and the proposed fee scheme, which is basically just separated out the fees that you've got a consultation part, which we will call the admin charge, and an actual issue of the consent charge. We also have asked to remove the 30 and 90-day street trading consents because they're not really well used. And regardless of how many days they trade, the process for each consent is exactly the same. And it doesn't really cover the cost of the council issuing a 30-day or 90-day street trading consent. We are going to continue, however, to do the short-term consents, which are 1 to 12 days, as they are popular. People use them to kind of try out street trade and see whether there's any demand for what they're selling. So we will continue to do those. Also, we've revised conditions to be applied to all street trading consent that are issued. And also, we ask that the delegation be given to the Head of Housing and Community Services to determine applications, which include those that have received objections, and then the Head of Housing and Community Services, when exercising his delegated authority, will consider whether it's necessary and proportionate for an appeal to be heard by the licensing subcommittee, based out on the criteria set out in the revised policy. Currently, all appeals are heard by licensing subcommittee, and they are heard on the basis that the written request is received from the applicant, irrespective of the merits of the case. So they basically just ask, and it's generally heard by a subcommittee. So the recommendations are that members consider the revised draft street trading policy, detailed and attached to the report, and to provide comments and feedback on that policy. That any comments and feedback are used to maybe amend the draft policy to bring back to Licensing Committee on the 17th of September for approval before consultation, and to agree the draft amended fee structure together with introducing the non-refundable consultation and application fees. And the preferred options are set out of 4. That members look at the detailed draft street trading policy, that it provides clear advice and information to all persons involved in the consent process, that the policy does set out the council's expectations of the street traders in the district, provides a clear understanding of what this council will consider when administering applications, how it will deal with issues and undertake any enforcement activity. It will support licensing officers in their day-to-day role in ensuring that the council's licensing aims within this policy are met and ensure good standards are met and maintained. The comprehensive review of street trading fees will be conducted to assess the full process at a later date. And that's it, members.
Thank you, Mrs. Neal. I have 3 councillors wishing to speak so far on this. I have Councillor Springett first, Councillor Garton, Councillor Sams and Councillor Fissenden. So we'll start with Councillor Springett.
Thank you. I do welcome this report, and the exemptions deal with a problem that we did have with Bearsted, which is referred to in the report. So I absolutely welcome that. That's fantastic. My only confusion is in the fees table on page 31. We've got the current fee for up to 12 trading days is new only on grant £32, but then that's staying as 32, but with the addition of 150. So are we now saying that to get a new 12 trading day licence is £182, or am I misreading this?
Mrs. Neal?
No, the £32 fee will stay. We will do the consultation, but you can only have one of them. So you can try it. It's a trial period. Once you've done your 12 days, you then have to apply for the full consent. So you'll only be allowed to have one 12-day consent.
What, in a year?
Not necessarily. If you use your 12 days up within, say, 2 months, you then get issued another consent. Yeah.
Right. I was just a bit confused because with the further down, the full year consent, new and renewal, was 405. It's going to be 255, which takes account of the £150 fee.
Yeah.
But we haven't taken the £32 off the 150. I was just a bit confused.
No. So the £32 will stay, and we will issue a £32 consent for up to 12 days trading. If they take their 12 days in 12 days, then after the 12 days they've got to apply for a completely new consent, which will give them all year trading, and then they'll have to pay the new fee again. Is that okay?
No, I'm sorry, I'm really confused. So someone that wants to do 12 weekends in a year.
Yeah, that won't cover it.
That won't cover it. Like not weekends, but 12 Saturdays out of a year.
Saturdays. Yes, they've got up to a year to take them.
Yeah.
So if it's issued.
How much are they going to pay? So someone comes to you and says, I want to do 12 Saturdays next year. Are they paying just £32, or have they got to pay 150 on top of 32?
No, it will be £32 because they'll only be able to have one. Yeah.
I think I've got that now. Thank you.
Okay, it was helpful, Councillor Springett, that you asked that question because it was a query that I was going to bring up. So thank you, Mrs. Neal. Right, I've got a list now. Councillor Garton next. Councillor Garton.
Can you hear me?
Yes, can now.
Okay. Yeah. I always say fix it. Here.
We're not actually hearing you clear. You're breaking up.
Right. Can you hear me better?
That's better. Yes.
I'll hold it. I don't know what is the matter with this technology today. Okay. If it ain't broke, why fix it? Where to start with this whole proposal? First of all, we are being asked to delegate something which there is no need to delegate. I can't really remember a lot of subcommittee hearings on street trading, so why should we delegate powers there? The 2010/2014 amended version of the policy seems to be pretty straightforward, very simple to read. Maybe not as prescriptive, but it actually makes sense. While if we then look at the new draft version, it becomes rather convoluted. It does not really solve any problems which I'm facing, that is car sales on public greens, advertising boards on motorway bridges. None of that is in any which way addressed by that. But I'm not even sure whether that Bearsted problem has been solved with that, because we have then community and charitable events at 2.61. That again is so vague. What is a community event? Should we say regularly organized events by parish councils or by recognized community groups? Something like that needs to be put in there to make it actually less vague. At the moment it is too vague from being not possible. It is too vague now. And everything else, I mean, even the criminal convictions, which should be taken into consideration or not, on the Appendix 2, item B, violence, or C, drugs. I don't quite even understand what it means. It says, well, it says draft over it, so it makes it rather difficult to read, but it says then 5 to, unless 5 to 10, and then 10 years have lapsed. So I don't understand. Is it now 5 years have to be lapsed, 10 years have to be lapsed, or is that just a misspelling? And why to be so prescriptive about these particular things? I think a conviction should be taken into consideration, but it should be taken into consideration proportionately. I mean, any sexual indecency offences exclude people from street trading under this policy for life. There are, again, different degrees of sexual and indecency offences, and it should not necessarily cause the possibility to be excluded from street trading for life. So I think this is just too complicated, too convoluted, not necessary, and I will vote.
Sorry, I lost you on the last line.
I will vote against it.
Thank you. I just want to make this clear. It is for us to be putting our inputs in so that changes can be looked into. So I don't think this has come to you as a complete report. It's for us to add to. Okay, next we've got a list. Councillor Sams.
Thank you. Mine was just a question, really, that there in none of the report is there anything about COVID-19. I just wanted to sort of ask why that was, because obviously that has an effect on quite a lot of this. Thank you.
Mrs.
Okay, the reason why there isn't anything about COVID-19 is because I would imagine this policy or a version of this policy would not be adopted anytime soon. I would imagine it would come in at some point next year. Due to, I mean, it would need to go out to consultation even when a document's approved. That you have to give a minimum 3 months to. So it's not going to be a quick process. So that's why, if COVID-19 restrictions are still in, there will be something that will be given with the street trading policy to be used in conjunction with it.
Thank you. Councillor Fissenden.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to, kind of new to this, so the exemptions on number 1 on page 30, why have these fairs been trading without the appropriate licence in the first place? I was just, because obviously Yalding Christmas Market's been going on for a number of years, and where trading consents have never been in place. I just wondered why that was.
That would be because the events that have gone on for years have we've not been made aware of them. And then what happened was they set up the Safety Advisory Group, where all events over a certain number have to be submitted through that group. And so there are various people that are consulted, and that's when we started to become aware that these events had licensable activities going on without having been licensed throughout all the years.
Right, so see, I just wondered if, for example, Yalding didn't think they needed anything purely for the fact because they run a bi-monthly farmers market.
The Yalding Farmers Market does have street trading consent. It's generally the Christmas market that causes the issue.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Nearly there. Councillor Nagy.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I was reading it like other councils at the beginning. It looks like it's 150 quid, then you pay your 32 quid. That's I think it's just how it's laid out. But how does it cover for when you want just one day as trading? And if someone just wants to trade and the time up to how long you have to allow for a time to get an application in and granted before an event. I'd like to have seen that written down because most people don't know that. We have to always find that one out. So it would be nice to know how long it takes to get a trading event, a trade for these things to take, you know, in the system, 12 days would take so long, or would 30 days take longer, or blah blah. Are all they all the same? If you see what I mean. That's the sort of like the question now. I'm confusing me a bit. Thank you.
Mrs. Neal.
Well, that's where it's hoping the policy will assist, because street trading is convoluted and the current policy doesn't reflect that. All applications, regardless of how many days trading, the process is the same. We receive the application and we have to do a 14 consultation on every application, regardless how many days trading they're asking for.
Okay, Councillor Nagy? I'm assuming yes. Right, Councillor Grigg.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
I was just asking a question back then because my button didn't clear.
Oh, sorry, sir. Can you just hold a minute? Just a second. Councillor Grigg, can you just wait until Councillor Councillor Nagy comes back?
Yeah, sorry, my button didn't press properly. I just wanted to know how long a consultation application would take.
The consultation for all applications is 14 days.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Grigg.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Obviously, I can see from our available options, we are being asked to comment on this policy, and actually Councillor Springett did cover a lot of my queries because I was trying to work it out and I did find it very confusing. I think what I would comment is if a resident was to ask me what they would have to pay for a certain number of days, I would certainly have to phone you to find that out, because I find this so confusing and so difficult to understand. So I think one of my comments is there any way we can simplify? The other thing is the 30 and 90 street trading consents that you're proposing to remove. You've put here that there's little uptake. Can you just explain to me what is little? Is it none? Is it a percentage? What would you expect? Because there's quite a difference between 12 trading days and 90.
Mrs. Neal.
I don't have the exact figures, but if memory serves, I think we've only issued probably 2 30-day consents in about 2 years. 90 is probably slightly popular, and that is probably about 5. The majority either go for the 12 days or for the full year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I have no one else indicating to speak. Again, I shall ask Councillor Fort, who's on the phone, whether she wishes to comment.
I think the draft is welcome. However, as we've said earlier, there needs to be a few bits ironed out just to make it easier to understand.
Thank you. Mrs. Neal, I don't know if this has been of any great help to you, but as I said, as Councillor Grigg has just said, it is for us to give our feedback. I don't know if it has been helpful or not, but I think you must have got the gist of what members' comments have been. Yes.
Yes, it's more or less what I expected, to be quite honest. But it is. Every phone call that we ever get about a street trading application, that policy is what we have to go with every person with. So what we were hoping is we have a document so that we don't have to keep repeating ourselves every time somebody makes an inquiry about a street trading application. Yeah. Obviously, we've not achieved that, so we've got to go away and look at it.
Okay. So if everybody has... Oh, just a minute. Have I got someone else? Councillor Rose, are you typing to say you wish to speak? Councillor Rose.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. I was typing. Mrs. Neal just answered the question. I was just wondering about the advice that people will get if they need it. But I think she just mentioned that. So thank you very much for that.
Right. So if we have...
Madam Chairman, sorry, may I just come in here on just on a technical point from the point of view of what we're actually voting for now? Because obviously a for and against, this is such a large thing. We're actually commenting on it. So do we actually need to give a for and against, or are our comments just going forward? Because, you know, as it stands at the moment, I'd probably be against, but most of it I agree with.
Mr. O'Connell, can you just come in and clarify for us?
Yeah, certainly. So the way in which the recommendations are written is that essentially the views of the committee would be taken into account and taken into a revised draft of the document to come back to a future licensing committee. However, the third recommendation is to agree the draft amended fee structure to together introduce a non-refundable consultation application fee. So I think from the sounds of the conversation, that would be a case of, I think there's some questions about how the table's presented, but I don't know whether or not, you know, so that would be an actual hard and fast recommendation for the committee to consider, number 3, whether they agree the draft amended fee structure, perhaps not how it's being presented, but the actual fee structure itself, along with introducing a non-refundable consultation application fee. The numbers 1 and 2 are asking for the committee's comments, which I assume Mr. Neil will take into account before it comes back.
That's correct.
Thank you. So is everybody in agreement then that if we were to take them as point 1, 2 and 3, rather than a yes, a for or against, would that be...
Could I just come in, please? Is that all right?
Councillor Nagy?
Yeah, obviously Lorraine is the one here, the senior management, who we always rely on. Could she say if she...
We've lost you, Councillor Nagy.
Yeah, sorry, bloody button. I'm just thinking, I'd like to hear from Lorraine, because obviously she's our senior management, and if she thinks that comments tonight she could review and come back in and put them in, is that something she would like to see tonight, or would she like to see us vote on what we've talked about tonight?
No, I found the comments very helpful, because obviously I want a document that everybody understands. So the feedback is it's not very understandable. Bits of it are good and bits of it aren't. So all your comments I will take away and I will apply to it.
Does that mean we wait for Lorraine to do the alterations and come back? Is that something we're saying?
Mr. O'Connell, can you come back again?
Well, recommendation 2 states that the draft policy would be amended to reflect any feedback and would be brought back to this committee in September.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the way to go. If I could propose that. Thank you.
Right. Okay. So we will go on to it's on page 28, just so you can find that first, and it makes the following recommendations to consider. And have we agreed that we're going to do it 1, 2 and 3 rather than all together?
Madam Chair, would it make sense to take 1 and 2 together and do 3 separately?
I'm quite happy to do that. No, oh, there we go. Yes, it's just come up. Yes, if we take 1 and 2 together, 3 separately. I'm not having anyone on my messenger saying that they disagree. So we'll do that, yeah? But do we need someone to propose the recommendation first, Mr. O'Connell?
Well, I think Councillor Nagy proposed recommendation 2.
So we need a seconder.
So whether he wants to propose.
Well, I would propose if number 2 definitely. If we want to put number 1 in there and people agree with it, I'm quite happy to do that.
Thank you, Councillor.
I'll second that.
That gives Lorraine the opportunity to go back with all these things we've said tonight and shouldn't have a problem when she presents it again, in my view.
And how about recommendation 3?
Oh, I'm not proposing that.
Okay.
Would anyone like to propose recommendation 3? No.
Yeah, I'll propose it.
I mean, can I just that I'm only expecting that to come in should a new policy come in. So the new fee structure would come in with a new policy. So it's kind of moot at the moment.
So Lorraine, is it worth bringing that back in September?
Yes.
as a firm recommendation in September, along with the revised policy.
Yeah.
I think that'll make more sense. So if we can do 1 and 2 together, number 3 will come back. Councillor Nagy has proposed, and I think it was Councillor Fissenden, was it, that seconded?
Correct.
Yes, that's
yes,
fine.
Madam Chair. Yep.
So I will now go to you, Mr. O'Connell, to alphabetically ask members to vote.
Thank you. So if members could respond with for, against or abstain. Councillor Fissenden. Councillor Fissenden.
Sorry, I keep turning my mic off. 4.
Councillor Fort.
4.
Councillor Garton.
Did you hear me?
Can hear you now.
Yeah, I said I'm against. I prefer the whole process to be scrapped right now.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Grigg.
4.
Councillor Hinder.
4.
Councillor Joy.
4.
Councillor Nagy.
4.
Councillor Pearl.
4.
Councillor Mrs. Robertson.
4.
Councillor Rose.
4.
Councillor Sams.
4.
And Councillor Springett.
4, but the wording on the table needs to be slightly clarified. That's all. But 4.
Okay. What do you mean by clarification?
Well, it caused a confusion for me with the 150 and the 32. So somehow there just needs a little note put in there because even now, if I went in the table, I'd still be a little bit confused.
So the recommendations are that the feedback that's been given will be fed into the policy to come back in September.
That's fine. So 4 on that basis. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. That concludes the voting.
Everybody, I'll now ask the Democratic Services Officer to confirm the result of the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That is 11 for and 1 against.
Thank you. Right, we move on. Item 16, which is the busking guidelines. You can find this on page 75. And again, we go to Mrs. Neal.
Hello again. Okay, this report provides details regarding a draft voluntary busking guidance document for street entertaining in the Borough of Maidstone and specifically the town centre, and that document can be found at Appendix 1. Licensing actually received quite a lot of inquiries from the public about street entertainment and busking, and they was asking if they need a licence or whether there's any particular kind of procedures or where they can set up. And obviously we don't have anything sort of formal to give them, and generally our advice to them is just apply your common sense. No, you don't need a licence. Yes, you can set yourself up where you want, but just apply common sense, and that's about as much as we can give them really currently. I think what's happened over recent years is there has been sort of complaints around noise and just the general numbers and attendance in town. Sometimes, you know, there may be 3 or 4 of them all set up in quite close proximity, and they cause a bit of a nuisance to sort of passers-by and businesses. And so this, I think we've talked about it for quite some time about drafting together some kind of voluntary guidance for buskers to follow, street entertainers to follow. And the document attached is basically the guidance we think will assist Maidstone in managing street entertainers that turn up in the area. So it's a document that basically is for everybody's use. It's bits there for business, bits for buskers, and bits for officers. It's a relatively light touch document. There are 3 different kind of levels of action. There's verbal, written, and then it will go on to any specific enforcement after that. Although you know licensing don't license buskers, the local authority itself is actually obligated in law to try to reduce noise, help assist with obstruction and antisocial behaviour. And hopefully this document will encourage the community practice in shared spaces and will allow all parties to kind of work together. And that, you know, it's hoped that it's a document that it will be referred to first before anybody actually makes contact with the council. So, you know, the council's keen to, like, you know, encourage street entertainment into the area, but we'd like it to be sort of slightly more managed, I suppose. Excuse me. Okay, and the report actually asked the committee to consider the draft Busking guidelines. It asked for the feedbacks on the comments, and then if committee agree that the document or the document with minor amendments is agreeable, then it would be given an 8-week consultation, and that will be undertaken with the people mentioned within the document. And again, I'm kind of asked to remind you by the policy team that any consultation they undertake, you have to give a minimum 3 months for any kind of result to come back to you. So that's the document. So the document asks, so this report makes the following recommendations: that feedback is provided and that can be input into the draft voluntary busking guideline, and a document agreed for consultation. And that following any consultation period, the busking guidelines, together with the summary of the key consultation comments, is put back to the licensing committee for consideration.
Thank you. I have 4 councillors waiting to speak. It'd be Councillor Springett, Councillor Robertson, Councillor Pearl, Councillor Hinder. So Councillor Springett.
Thank you. First of all, I was really pleased to see this. I think it's an excellent document. It's a great idea, and congratulations to Lorraine and the team for producing this, actually. I think it's really, really good. I've just got one area I'm a little bit, it needs clarification. It's page 82. The second paragraph says amplification by means of an external source, such as a PA system or one requiring a power source, is not permitted. Then you drop down to about the 6th paragraph, and it says acts that include pre-recorded backing tracks as a secondary aspect. If you've got a pre-recorded track, you've got to play it on an amplifier or something. So there's just a little bit of a conflict in the wording that just perhaps could be a little bit better. I can't suggest at the moment, but if we could just look at the wording between those 2 paragraphs. Apart from that, brilliant, and I'm really pleased with it.
Good. Good. Councillor Robertson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I agree with Councillor Spring. This is a good document, and I think we have to bear in mind now that there are a lot more residential properties.
Councillor Robertson,
within the town centre.
I'm the only one that's getting a Dalek voice.
No, none of us can hear her.
No, I can't hear her.
Adversely affected.
She can't hear us.
You know, by loud music. So I think we do have to bear that in mind. And it's a good document.
Right, well, I heard it was a good document. I'm sorry, Cynthia, we couldn't quite catch what you said.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, we couldn't quite catch everything you said. Can you hear me? Don't know if you can.
Councillor Robertson. Councillor Robertson.
Did you hear me?
Could you try turning your video off?
She's muted herself. Cynthia, you've muted yourself. That's the one.
All right. Councillor Robertson, could you try speaking now?
Yeah. Hello.
That's better.
Sounds better.
Yeah. Do you want to come back, Cynthia?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. No, I was just saying that I agree with Councillor Springett. It's a very good document, you know, guidance. And we do have to bear in mind that there are a lot more residential properties within the town centre now that need to be given consideration.
Ah, right.
Okay.
Thank you. Loud and clear now. Councillor Pearl.
I fear I'm in a minority of one on this, so I'll waive if that's okay.
Okay. Councillor Hinder.
I just wanted to concur with what Val said as well. I think it's a good document. There are some extremely good buskers in town that I've enjoyed over the years, and I welcome any moves that we can make to make their life easier, better and enjoyable for the public.
Thank you. Councillor Garton.
Yeah, maybe Councillor Pearl is just in a minority of one. Maybe he wants to join me. I'm not quite sure about the point of this document. It's a fine document, gives some guidelines, but it's a document for the sakes of it. There's very little about any enforcement or any sound rules. I can't really think of any particular problems we've had with buskers in Maidstone recently, which puts the need forward for such documents. So I think it's just paper for paper's sakes.
Thank you, but I will comment. We do have problems with buskers, but I'll get Mrs. Neal to come back. Lorraine, do you want to come back yet, or you're going to do it at the end?
No, I can do it now. I mean, obviously, at the moment, we haven't got any problem with buskers because there's no one to hear them. But we have had many problems. I mean, not all buskers are during the day. Some of them at night as well. And we have the reggae man that turns up at 2 in the morning and plays quite loudly. And I understand that other businesses are open, but not everybody's happy to hear him. And we do get complaints, unfortunately. And although we don't license buskers, what we want is a document where they follow it voluntarily. We can't actually, there isn't a lot of enforcement we can do from a licensing point of view. All enforcement will be done from an environmental point of view around noise and antisocial behaviour. The licensing actually don't have any real powers to enforce this document, but it's something that, you know, people, we hope, will want to work with us. And going by the amount of kind of phone inquiries we get about busking, I think people will, the majority of them will. You'll always get an element that won't. But if we've got something that we consider to be a sort of best practice, I think that's better than nothing, to be quite honest.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, if I can just comment on
Councillor Garton. Yes.
The reply, yes. That is all fine as a result, but I think it would be more sensible for this committee to put forward this document or something, a recommendation to Chi committee to take it forward, because if we don't have any enforcement powers, it's paper for the sake of paper.
Are you making a proposal?
I'm happy to make
yeah, go on.
To send this to Chi, yeah.
Do you have a seconder, Councillor Garton?
Yes, I've already indicated on the IM.
Right. Just before I call anyone else in, I'd like the Officer John Littlemore to come in, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It was just to pick up the point about enforcement and just to respond to the reference to Chi Committee. I think what the document would enable us to do that we don't currently have is something that we can use if we were to serve a community protection notice or a warning. So it would assist in that context. So I wouldn't agree that it has no value at all. It does in that sense. As Lorraine indicated, last year during the summer, we did have some between buskers, in actual fact, as well as some of their shop businesses complaining about that. So it would help us. I'm not sure what the reference to Chi Committee would actually achieve, because the powers that we have around community protection warnings and notices exist now. So we wouldn't actually be proposing anything new by going to Chi Committee. But hopefully that clarifies why we've brought it to licensing committee and why we wanted the guideline rather than carry on as we are at present with nothing at all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, John. I'm reading my thing, and it's saying that Councillor Pearl has seconded Councillor Garton. Are you still wishing for that to hold, Councillor Garton? That it goes to Chi?
If Councillor Pearl still supports it, I will still support it.
Councillor Pearl?
I do indeed support it.
Right, well, I still have people wishing to speak, so we'll go back to my list. And the next one I have is Councillor Nagy.
Thank you, Chairman. This Busking is calling out for something like this because it's so general. And what in the legal it says it's only Busking does not generally require a license. I wish that said it does or it doesn't, because that leaves everything open to interpretation, doesn't it? And that is the trouble. Buskers can be really good, and most of them are. There's the bagpipe players. They're fantastic. They do their type thing. They come home. It's not amplified, and it's fantastic. But when we have amplified music that drowns out the shops in the area, people are expecting Maidstone Borough Council to have some sort of policy on it. And I know when we've had, and one of the things I must bring up, it says on the, we only need to cover from 8 o'clock to 2300 hours. Well, we should cover to 4 in the morning, because I've seen buskers on the town square. Or I think no, it's not called. What's it called now? Is it called the town square? Have they changed it? Outside the town hall.
Square, yeah.
And the police say it's nothing to do with them, even if they're causing a nightmare. It's nothing to do with the police. It's a council problem. And of course, if it's gone past 2300 hours, we're a bit buggered on that, you see. And I think this, if we get this policy right, we need something now. I know there's not many people busking around at the moment, but we was inundated with them. We need something, and we need to show the public that we've actually considered it and tried to do something about it. But unfortunately, I agree with all the other councillors that have mentioned this, the enforcement. If the police won't do nothing, and they blame the council, all the council will say, yeah, well, we recommend this in our guidelines, but there's nothing we can do about it unless we come and measure your speaker over certain decibels. And this is the nuisance issues that when they turn their speakers up and they blast out everything in the area, which I've personally seen. I'm getting the stick as a councillor representing Maidstone Borough Council. Why don't the council do something about this, Dave? And I think what I see in front of me tonight is the start of this. And lots of things in here I could bring up, but we do need something to this. We are desperate to have something on busking, and unfortunately, with the legal, I didn't like this term. Busking does not generally require a licensing under the Licence Act. Well, what's that mean generally? We always have this word discussion in licensing, words, and generally doesn't mean they're really breaking the law, doing anything wrong. But it's when they do get out of order, everyone expects the council to have some sort of policy on it. And we have to extend the hours to 2 or 3 in the morning, because there is a problem at night when the buskers do get out of control and cause a nuisance. But the police won't shift them on because it's nothing to do with them unless they're breaking the law. So in my view, I like to see us carry on with this busking policy and get legal to advise us what general means. So when it comes, like to see it come back to this committee with proper legal advice on what general means, and see what enforcement we can carry out. Because otherwise, I do agree with the other, it would just become a report or a bit of advice that everyone will ignore because there is no enforcement. I did rant on a bit there, sorry.
Just a bit, but I'll let you. You got away with that.
Thank you.
Mrs. Neal, do you want to come back on this yet?
No, I'll leave it to the end if you don't mind.
Okay, thank you. I have 2 more, and then we'll go back to. I know you want to speak, Councillor Pearl. I've got Councillor Sams and then Councillor Grigg. Councillor Sams.
Thank you. I typed a message and then I crossed it out. I mean, I agree with most of what the councillors are saying. I think we do need something. I think we do need guidelines, and I think we've got to also think that through this pandemic, we might end up with lots of people who have been practising really hard while they've been furloughed or off work, and they might well be busking.
Agreed.
So, but I do think we need something, and I don't think it is for paper's sake, because I think that we need to be able to give buskers and our residents guidelines onto what they should expect.
Right. Councillor Grigg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually see this as a responsibility of this committee, not Chi. I think it's a very welcome, comprehensive and necessary document, and I'm very pleased to see it. But I actually think personally it will be more useful after COVID, because at the moment, with particularly community protection warnings, it's not realistic. They're not enforceable. Could you just clarify with me? I think I'm right in saying that the community protection wardens, the enforcement notices are handed out by council, not police. So I think actually this is a very, very welcome document, and I think it will really come into its own after COVID.
Thank you. Right, I don't have anyone else at the moment. So Mrs. Neal, would you like to come back, and then we'll go back to Councillor Garton and Councillor Pearls?
Yes, certainly. Yes, I do think that, you know, given the rate of inquiries we do get, we do need a document, because people do actually want to be steered, and most people will actually go along with some guidance, and they quite like to know exactly where they stand. And busking guidance is you know, lots of authorities have adopted guidance to assist them with managing their buskers. And this is a voluntary document, but most people actually want to work with local authorities rather against them. And this basically kind of explains very clearly to them where we stand with it all. And as Sue said, again, I'm not seeing this document come into place for some time. And again, should COVID-19 still be around, there will be additional guidance issued with it. But that's why COVID hasn't been addressed in the document. Yeah.
Thank you. And Mr. Littlemore, would you like to just come in with your last comments, please?
Thank you, Chair. I was just picking up the question that Councillor Grigg asked, and that was who can issue a community protection warning and notice. So within our own local authority, there are those staff that are designated and authorised to do so, but the police can also issue those. Just in terms of what sort of document or what would be needed for something to have even more teeth than what we're proposing, well, I would have thought you're probably looking at something along the lines of a bylaw, that sort of thing. Now, the cost and the length of procedure to obtain all that it's expensive and it's long-winded. I'm sure our legal advisor tonight can confirm that. So that's why we're proposing this route. We felt, given the amount of complaints we get, what we're proposing is proportionate to the difficulties. Trying to go for something that was much tougher just didn't feel proportionate to the difficulties we're facing, and in terms of cost and also implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harris, do you have anything to say? I've just noticed your picture there on this.
Thank you. Yeah, I could pick up on a couple of points that have been made. The reason why it says busking doesn't generally require a licence is because busking doesn't generally require a licence, which means there are occasions where a busker might require a licence, but in the overwhelming majority of times a busker doesn't require a licence. So it's not possible to say as a matter of hard fact that busking does not require a licence or busking does require a licence. Sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. More often than not it doesn't. Hence, generally, it doesn't require a licence. Unfortunately, it's impossible to be more accurate than that or otherwise. I think Mr. Littlemore is correct when he says in relation to actually having legal controls on it. In fact, I think I'll go further. I'm not sure you could cover it under a bylaw. I think you'd need a local act. Obviously, there already is the Maidstone Act, isn't there? But it doesn't cover busking, to the best of my knowledge. And actually, yes, there was discussions around various different local authorities about whether or not it's worth having a local act to deal with markets more effectively, and it was considered to take up to 3 years and be in excess of £50,000. I think to do that in order to control the busking problem was probably lacking in proportion. I think that was all the points that legal were asked to pick up.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Mr. O'Connell, if I can just ask a question before we move on? Because we've had a proposal from Councillor Garton, seconded by Councillor Pearl. I'm assuming you still want this to go ahead, Councillor Garton?
Yes, I do.
Right. So can I please have advice, Mr. O'Connell, as to whether we deal with that first and take a vote as to whether but we need to know exactly what it is you're proposing, Councillor Garton, I think, first.
Well, I was proposing to send that report forward to Chi and for them to have a look at it, possibly amend it and make it more legally binding rather than just being a guideline. Because we don't seem to have the powers to do that at this committee.
Okay. Councillor Pearl, are you still agreeing with that? Seconding that, sorry.
I am, Chair, and may I come in at this point, please?
You may indeed.
What struck me about this when I first sort of read this report is, the fact that over the years I've heard a lot of feedback as to what's wrong with Maidstone Town Centre, and it's complaints about things like aggressive begging, chugging, street drinking, people at the top end of Week Street shouting at each other or themselves sometimes, people openly smoking drugs, the mess you get in terms of the way sort of the gum now sticks to the new crazy paving, and I accept the point that certain, in certain sort of extreme, in certain extreme cases, you get antisocial busking as well. A general sort of fluffy, unenforceable or relatively unenforceable sort of set of guidance on busking doesn't, in my view, tackle what's the issue is with the town centre. I'm sorry, but we can tackle the antisocial aspects of busking, such as the person playing their amplified music at 2 a.m. in the morning and so on and so forth. And I'm surprised it's not been mentioned. We've got section 59 of the 2014 Act, the power to make a public spaces protection order, for example. And I'm sure Mr. Littlemore will remember, and I'm sure Chairman, you'll remember it yourself, that the Crime and Disorder Committee of this council voted on the 24th of September last year to recommend that that the public spaces protection order in the town centre be tightened up substantially. And I think that if we want to tackle the excesses or the worst excesses of busking, the worst aspects of it, in terms of its antisocial aspects, then, as I say, Chi is the best place to do it because Chi can move forward proposals in respect to such things as public spaces protection orders.
Thank you. Mr. O'Connell?
Yes?
Can I just come back to you now and ask whether this is the time that we will vote on the proposal from Councillor Garton?
Okay, so there is only one proposal on the table at the moment.
Yes.
So yes, that is what is substantive, so we would vote on that. The only thing I'm unclear on with the proposal is that the single recommendation is that it goes to Chief for them to consider it, or is it in addition to this committee looking at it as well? Because there's proposals on the paper, so are you adding to the proposals on the papers or are you replacing them with a single recommendation?
I have no intention for this committee to have a further look at these presentations now, because as Councillor Pearl just quite clearly said, she has the powers to consider it and put some meat on the bone to this document.
Could I just come in on that, Chairman? I'd love to know what the legal man says. As this committee, Chi got the ability to do something because obviously, Councillor Garton said it, they might be able to change the law or change something like that. I'd like the legal man to say, is that a possibility or is that just a wish? Thank you.
His name is Mr. Harris, Councillor Nagy. Mr. Harris, would you like to come in?
My personal view is that the referring of this matter to Chi is the wrong way to go about it, because this matter is in relation to a draft policy on busking, which would be a guideline, it would be similar to the voluntary policy that exists in relation to what are commonly known as chuggers, which actually, despite having no particular enforcement power, seems to work very well in various places. There's no reason why CHI can't discuss having a PSPO that deals with buskers, but you wouldn't include in a PSPO in respect of buskers guidelines as to how busking would work. So this is, for me, the licensing committee is an appropriate place, the appropriate venue to deal with a voluntary policy on busking and what we would expect, and she is the appropriate place to deal with a PSPO. But the two things are actually materially different things, and that all that would happen if this went, this would cease to be under CHI. A PSPO is something different. So for me, it's appropriate for the licensing committee to make a decision on this set of guidance one way or the other this evening, and there's no reason why the CHI can't consider how they might deal with busking under the PSPO regime, for example, as part of their work programme.
Thank you, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Harris.
I'm not sure if I've missed Councillor Grigg. Have you?
It was only something very quick, Madam Chairman, to say that obviously we've been referring an awful lot to town centre, but can I assure members that amplified music can be just as big a problem in rural areas?
Thank you.
Agreed.
Okay. Mr. O'Connell, back to you.
Okay, so what is the advice that you're looking for here?
I am waiting for advice as to whether now that we can vote on the proposal that's just been given by Councillor Garton, seconded by Councillor Pearl, that this is all referred to CHI. So do we vote on that?
Yes.
Thank you. So I'll hand it over to you to do alphabetically. Thank you. Oh, and it's for and against or abstain.
Yep. Thank you. Councillor Fissenden. Councillor Fissenden. Okay, I'll come back to Councillor Fissenden. Councillor Fort.
For.
Councillor Garton.
For.
Councillor Grigg.
Against.
Councillor Hinder.
For.
Councillor Joy.
Against.
Councillor Nagy.
Against.
Councillor Pearl.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Robinson.
Against.
Councillor Rose.
Against.
Councillor Sams.
Against.
Councillor Springett.
Against.
Councillor Fissenden.
You must have turned off.
I think she's dropped off the call.
Right.
Okay, so that's all the members who are present at the time of voting.
Thank you. So I will now ask the Democratic Services Officer to confirm the result, please.
Thank you, Chair. That is 7 against and 4 for.
Thank you. So I will assume now that we go back to, that is lost, that we go back to the recommendations on page 75 of the report. Yes, Mr. O'Connell?
Well, I mean, that's normally the default position, but somebody would still have to move those and second those.
Right.
Could I just come in, Chairman?
You may indeed, Councillor.
I did suggest that we altered the timings, if the members agree with me, that 8 in the morning to 2300 hours is just a bit early, because we've already discussed how bad it can be after that time. I was wondering if that could be an amendment, like for maybe 3 o'clock in the morning to cover it, because I think that would help people that have to deal with this sort of thing late at night. At least they can say it's in the time. Otherwise, any buster can say, well, I've gone past that time, so there's nothing in the advice about that. You see, I just think that's a grey area myself. I don't know what everyone else thinks.
Yes, I hear what you're saying, and I'll go back again and say what we are doing is providing feedback to Mrs. Neil so that she can go back. So yeah, I'm going to ask Lorraine to come back in a minute just to clarify. But is there anyone else that needs to speak on the recommendations that are on page 75? Councillor Nagy has just given his view. Is there any more? Councillor Grigg, have you just said?
Purely to say that I would be happy to propose that we go ahead, that considering, as long as all the comments that we've made have been considered into this document, I'm happy to propose that it goes forward.
Thank you.
If I have a seconder.
Yeah, I'll second that.
I'll second it.
There we go. Who was the first? Was it Councillor Fissenden?
Yes, I made it, Councillor Fissenden.
But she did, yeah. Did she vote on this one?
Oh, my Wi-Fi connection went.
She didn't vote on one, did she? Didn't vote on the last one.
Right.
No. So technically, if it was a regulatory matter, such as listening to an actual award of a licence or to a planning application, then a member would have to hear the whole debate in order to be able to vote.
Yes.
But as it's not, a member can come in, having been out of the room.
Okay, my Wi-Fi went. I'm happy if I can't see. Hold on. If Val wants to second it, because she was there for the whole duration.
Yeah, I'm happy to say. I'm happy to.
Thank you, Councillor Fissenden. Right, so we now have a proposal from Councillor Grigg, seconded by Councillor Springett. So now we go back to the facilitator to vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Fissenden?
4.
Councillor Fort?
4.
Councillor Garton?
Against.
Councillor Grigg?
4.
Councillor Hinder?
4.
Councillor Joy?
4.
Councillor Nagy?
4.
Councillor Pearl?
Abstain.
Councillor Mrs Robertson?
4.
Councillor Rose?
4.
Councillor Sams?
4.
And Councillor Springett?
4.
Thank you, Chairman. That concludes the voting.
Thank you. And I'll ask the Democratic Services Officer to confirm the result of the vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. So we have 10 for, 1 against and 1 abstention.
Thank you. And we move on. Item 17 can be found on page 87. Licensing Partnership Update Report, introduced by Bamborough. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you. Can I just check everybody can hear me okay? Yeah.
Yes, coming loud and clear.
Excellent. It's just because I'm dialing in, obviously. Right. Before you is the report outlining the annual performance of the licensing partnership. In it, I've outlined the challenges and achievements for the 1st of April 2019 to the 31st of March 2020. In section 3, it outlines the results against the service plan objectives for that year. Performance against the internal targets set for the hub team and partnership officers is set out in Appendix A. Maidstone performance is at the front of that appendix, followed by the same for all partners for comparison. The new service plan for the current financial year is attached to Appendix B. You may note, if you've read it, that we have introduced a couple of new items specific to the COVID-19 pandemic, objectives 6 and 7, and that will be for us to make adjustments where necessary to enable us to move forward and do things differently with the trade. For example, at the moment we can't do knowledge tests because of the scenario of that being a classroom situation and not being able to do them in the way that we used to do them, but we will start to plan ahead now and look at where we could possibly do a smaller version of that to a smaller number of people in a safe way, in order to then start taking applications for new drivers. And equally, we can't currently see people face to face because across the board, the partners, the receptions and such like are closed. But again, we've adapted the way that we're working so that we can continue to process applications and get licenses out to people. So that's all working really well. The hub team are all working from home, as are the partnership officers, and I have to say it's worked incredibly well in that we haven't seen a huge change in current performance or our ability to deliver. We've had very minimal impact, the knowledge test being the main thing. A particular highlight for me with Maidstone is the work that was undertaken by one of our hub team officers along with Louise from the Maidstone licensing team on all of the age debt inquiries, that's where annual fees for the premises license were possibly outstanding, and they've worked really, really hard and really brought that age debt down to much more manageable levels, and everybody's quite pleased about that, and we will now keep it hopefully at that level. That said, of course, nobody could have predicted what's happened this year, and we will keep that under close review as to how that then affects the industry going forward. But yeah, that's it from me. If you want to have, if you've got any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Sorry, my mic was off. Right. I've got Val typing a message, so I'm assuming you'd like to speak, Val. Councillor Springett, sorry.
That's all right. Yes, please. I just had a look through, and there were just a couple that jumped out at me of these performance things that I just wondered if you could shed any light on. Pages 105 and 106, which is the premises compliance and taxi compliance. They just seem to have a bit of not quite meeting targets more than others. In general, I thought it was all very, very good. But those two seem to sort of jump out at me. I wonder if there was a particular reason, or whether that's because of COVID, etc.
Not because of COVID at the moment, apart from March, because that was the only month of this particular year, because obviously we're looking at the last financial year, that would have been affected by the lockdown, because we did have a lot of premises compliance checks planned for late March, which had to be cancelled once we went into lockdown. What I would say is where we've put the value in the target. So if I go to the premises compliance, for example, so the monthly target is to do 15 actions, and just to make sure that everybody understands, when we talk about compliance work, it's not just on-site checks and visits, it's also investigations into complaints, members' inquiries specific to a particular premises or a particular taxi, anything that requires an investigation and as a resolution, and possibly further action, whether that be revocation, suspension, prosecution, whatever. So it covers the entire gamut of that type of work. So what I would say is that sometimes you might see the premises compliance not meet target, but you're talking 13 out of 15. And what I can say is that over the entire year, in general, what we do see is that if you add it all together, it's pretty much on. It's just sometimes some months they don't do as much as others. So, for example, if I draw your attention on premises compliance to August 2019, target's 15, and yet they've done 26. So some months overcompensate for the other months where they haven't been able to do as much, because sometimes it will just be affected by simple things like staff being on leave, because it is a small team. There is only Lorraine and Louise who do the enforcement and the compliance. So if one of them's off on leave and then the other is, suddenly, for example, I know that Lorraine had a particular period last year where it was like buses, suddenly reviews came along out of nowhere, and that kind of thing, where it just suddenly you can't plan for it, and it just pulls your time away from any planned activity that you do. So that might be why it looks worse than it is, but on balance, when you look at it over the whole year, I would say that it's generally quite good. On the taxi compliance, just bear with me, because I've just realised when you've mentioned the page numbers, I do apologise. When you're looking at the page numbers, that was the Sevenoaks compliance you were looking at, not the Maidstone. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Have you got it, Val?
I wasn't aware of that. No, I'm not sure where it.
So I mean, I'll tell you a little bit about that, just so that you understand why the taxi and premises compliance at Sevenoaks was particularly worse this year than other years, and that's because the staff. There's a team of 2 there, and basically they only had 1 member of staff for the majority of the year because one of the officers went on maternity leave, and we were just really unlucky at not being able to backfill very well. We started with a contractor, they didn't work out. We then advertised, and we had to advertise twice before we got anybody in post. So that's why they've had to concentrate on other areas and not go out and about as much. But the Maidstone compliance, let me just find your page numbers.
Thank you. What I missed on page 102, the title changes at the bottom of page 102 for the table on page 103. So okay, I'm happy with that now.
Sorry, the premises compliance for Maidstone is on page 96. Halfway down, and the taxi compliance, the header starts at the bottom of page 97 and continues over to 98. So it looks a lot better than the Sevenoaks. Let's take it as that. Take that win.
Thank you very much. That was my fault. That was my fault, Mrs. Bamber, because I'd missed the change. It was at the bottom of the previous page, so I'm happy with that. Thank you very much.
I was thinking I could have sworn that it wasn't like that, but yes, it was because we're looking at the Sevenoaks one.
And I'm happy if we're better.
Of course.
Right, let's have a look. Who else are we waiting for? Councillor Nagy.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to ask that figure on page 91, 3.8. It says just under £498,000, and Maidstone's bit was 150 grand. Now, I know when this partnership started, people said, well, what's Maidstone got to get out of this? Surely, with our nighttime economy, it's wasting our time. But I'd be interested to know what the breakdown is of the all 3 of the councils, if anyone's got that.
I haven't got it to hand, only because I hadn't anticipated the question. We can get that to you. I'm sure it's not top secret. I'll check with the chief officers. John might want to comment, but as long as they're all happy for the costs to be shared with the members, I'm happy to give it if the chief officers say there shouldn't be a problem with that.
Yeah, I was just asking that one, just because obviously is Maidstone still the biggest the biggest payer out? Does it still cost us the most?
They are, because they have the biggest percentage of the work generated, because the costings are not a four-way split. It is all based on the percentage of work that's generated for each partner, and Maidstone does have the highest percentage of around about 30% of the work. So they will pay more than the others because it's all based on paying for what we do and what is delivered, and it's all based on volumes and pretty much nothing else.
Yeah, I just was interested to know what the other councils are costing as well in the breakdown. That's all. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Livermore. Did you wish to come in?
Only to add that conversely, our expenditure might be higher, but our income is also higher. So the two things do balance each other out, as you know from all the discussion we have around fee setting. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's very true.
I don't have anyone else that's saying they wish to speak. Councillor Fort, again, I will come to you. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I'm fine with that.
You okay? Good.
Yep.
And Councillor Garton, you've cancelled your request, yes?
Correct, yeah. Correct.
That's to speak and not the pint I offered you. No, you cancelled. Okay, so if no one else wishes to speak, I just want to say, Sharon, could you go back and let everyone know how much we're appreciating what's going on in the office. I mean, I'm sure everybody else is in agreement with you. They've worked jolly hard, and I know there has been lots of changes from what I've read in the report. So it's just a thank you for you to go back and say how much we appreciate it.
I will pass that feedback on.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I keep wanting to say Councillor O'Connell, Mr. O'Connell. This is just for noting, I see, but do you still want a for and against on this one? Although
we wouldn't normally, but I mean, it's up to you, Chair, but we wouldn't normally. We'd normally
just
expect you to ask if there's any dissent, and if there's not any dissent, then just to note it.
Yeah, for me, it'll be easier if we do that. If there is anyone, can they please let me know now? Otherwise, we will all agree it's noted.
Noted.
And I hear nothing. So noted it is. So thank you very much. Now, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I've lost my agenda, which is why I've been shuffling papers. I think that was the last item, was it?
Yeah, it was.
Only the yellow pages bit.
And we took the yellow pages in part 1 earlier.
Absolutely. So my understanding is that I have survived my first...
Absolutely well done.
My congratulations, Chairman.
Well done, Denise.
Well done, Chairman.
Well done, everybody.
It's only worked because we've worked well together as a team. So I just want to thank everybody for taking part. It's been a good debate, and let's look forward to the next one. Okay.
Agreed.
Safe.
Well done.
Thank you.
Don't tell anybody else,
Thank
Councillor
you.
Joy, but you've been the best chair so far.
Oh,